Okay, Chairman, we're now live. If you'd like to commence the meeting, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a virtual meeting of the Pensions Committee of the London Borough of Hillingdon. This virtual meeting is also being broadcast simultaneously on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. My name is Councillor Martin Goddard, and I'm the chairman for this meeting. Before we start, some important online housekeeping for everyone present, please. Firstly, please ensure that any mobile phones around you are on silent. Please keep microphones muted when not speaking, and then unmute to speak. Only one person should speak at any time, and I, as chairman, will call those to speak and keep an eye on the room from my gallery view on those indicating. Now, if we can please therefore run through a roll call of those present, and if I can start with the committee members. Firstly, Councillor Philip Cawthorne.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor John Morse.
Present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, John. Councillor Raymond Graham. Ray, I know you're having some, I can see you indicating by hand that you're there, so that's fine. Councillor Tony Edgington.
Hello, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Then if we can go to the officers present, James Lake, Chief Accountant, London Borough of Hillingdon.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Yvonne Thompson-Hoyt, Interim Manager, Pensions Fund.
Present, Chair.
Thank you, Yvonne. Tunde Adekoya, Pensions Fund Accountant.
Present, Chair.
Thank you very much. Liz Penny, Democratic Services Officer.
Present, Chairman.
Okay. Then we have the attending members of the Pensions Board. Hayley Seabrook.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you, Hayley. Roger Hackett.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Tony Noakes.
Present, Chair.
Thank you very much. Zach Manier. I'm not sure if Zach has made it onto the call yet, has he? I don't see him.
No, I don't believe so, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Then we turn to the external advisors. I don't believe Craig Alexander from Hymans has joined us yet.
Oh no, I'm here, Chair. Present.
Oh, okay, thanks. Thank you, Craig. I didn't see you sneaking at the bottom of my screen there. That's great. Claire Scott, Investment Advisor.
Present, Chair.
Thank you very much. David O'Hara from ISIO.
Yeah, present.
Thank you, David. Suresh Patel from EY.
Present, Chair.
Thank you very much. And Larissa Midoni, also from EY.
Present, Chair.
Thank you very much. In terms of technical meeting control, if any councillor leaves the virtual meeting partway through for a period of time, for example, for a lost connection, I will continue the meeting unless we're not quorate, and quorum is 3 councillors. Importantly, any councillor who does leave the meeting for a period of time will not be able to vote on the item that they were not present for. Okay, so if we then turn to the agenda, first of all, is any apologies for absence, please?
No apologies, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interest and any matters coming before this meeting. I imagine councillors Cawthorne and Edgington will have their usual declarations. Tony?
Yes, I'm a retired member of the pension fund.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cawthorne, I think you probably have one as well, do you?
I do indeed. I'm a deferred member.
Thank
of
you.
The local government pension scheme.
Okay, fine. We have, thank you for that. We have 2 sets of minutes for the meetings that have gone recently. So let's take those and consider them in turn. First of all, please indicate if you have any issues or any points to raise on the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 28th of July 2020. I'm not seeing anything, so I will take those as accurate and approved. And then the second meeting, which took place on the 30th of September 2020. Again, any comments or indications about those? I'm not seeing anything, so we will take those as approved as well. Thank you. Just to confirm that part 1 of this meeting will be considered in public, and we have a second segment, part 2, which will be considered in private, at which point, before that starts, the live feed will be cut. So moving then into the main part of the agenda. First of all, we start with a report on the external audit of the pension fund. And perhaps, James, in the first instance, if I can turn this over to you, and then I believe Suresh will talk to us as well. James.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, before I hand over to EY to make the formal presentation, I just wanted to give committee an update on a few clarification points which I've been discussing with EY. There is a note in the original report which has been since updated regarding the pension fund annual report saying it wouldn't be ready. That report is actually ready as per agenda item 12 and will be handed over to EY next week for their audit. EY have indicated that this will be finished in line with the final audit opinion. So that part of the report has now been rectified. In the report also, there was quite a lot of narrative between fair values level 2 and level 3 adjustments. And I felt that actually both Hillingdon and EY worked quite well together collaboratively, and I felt that that wasn't really sort of seen in the original report. So I've asked them to amend that slightly. So now both parties sort of, it shows in the report, sorry, that there's more of a collaborative approach between the level 2 and level 3 adjustments between EY and Hillingdon. And just lastly, on page 26 of the EY report, there's some tidying up regarding pricing, which has just been fixed. So if I may, if I could pass over to Suresh now to do the formal presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, James. You obviously stolen my thunder on a couple of things I was going to say, so I will not repeat what you've just said. I'm also conscious that we obviously presented to this committee at the end of July with a progress report on the audit. So again, we won't repeat what we said there in terms of some of the areas of focus, but we do want to just highlight a couple of key things from the report that you have in your papers. I suppose first and foremost, we are substantially complete. We are almost there in terms of completing the pension fund audit. The only bit of sort of work of substance is membership data testing on which relates to the training, which Larissa will explain in a short while.
We appear to have lost Suresh, I think.
Yeah, I think he seems to have, his connection seems to have dipped out, I think. I can see he's sort of frozen on the screen. Suresh, can you hear us?
I can now. Sorry, my connection
back.
apparently my connection just dropped.
Okay.
I'm not sure how far I got on before I realised I was talking to myself. But
You just mentioned membership data, Suresh.
oh, okay. So the membership data testing is the only real thing of substance that we are still we'll still need to complete, and Larissa will just explain a bit more about that in a short while. In terms of the actual outcome of the audit, I am going to be issuing an unqualified opinion on the pension fund account, which is obviously a positive position for you to be in. You will see reference in the audit results report of a emphasis matter, and that's in relation to your pooled property investments, where, as again, I think we mentioned this in the July meeting, as a result of COVID-19, valuers of property have been required to insert in their valuation reports, in effect, a caveat around the valuations been impacted by COVID-19. What the emphasis matter does, it's not a qualification or a modification, it's highlighting to the reader of the accounts that you've got that disclosure in your accounts, and given the size of your pool property investments, we think that's the valid thing to emphasise in our audit report. So, like I say, it's not a qualification, it's not a modification, it's simply highlighting to the reader of the account something that we think is important. And a lot of pension funds who have got significant pool property or directly held property will have similar emphasis and matter paragraphs in their audited reports. Similarly, any local authorities who hold substantial investment properties, for example, they will too have those emphasis and matter paragraphs in their audit reports. So just to be that context. You're also going to be an area of focus for the audit. We are satisfied with the disclosures that the pension fund has now got in its accounts, and we've reviewed the assessment that was made to underpin that disclosure, and we are satisfied with the basis of the assessment made and the disclosures. So that included looking at the cash flow forecast, for example, of the fund. Clearly, given the basis of the contributions being made to the fund, we no evidence to suggest that that admitted bodies aren't going to be paying over contributions. We're clearly satisfied with the position of the pension fund for the next 12 months, which is what obviously the going concern assertion refers to. In terms of a couple of other things, I was going to let Larissa just talk to you quickly about the classification changes that James has also highlighted, and then she can also take you through Appendix B, which is the list of outstanding items, and we can update you on those. So Larissa, do you want to pick up the valuation point, please?
Yes, thank you, Suresh. So for those who would like to follow in the agenda pack, I'm starting on page 58 of the pack. So as James already mentioned, we were in close collaboration with management, and we came to a common agreement that pooled property assets should be classified as level 3 due to the increased uncertainty around valuation in relation to COVID-19. With regards to the same point, we're recommending that management implement controls around fair value higher classification, just to make sure that this is reviewed on a regular basis for such events. So moving on, I'm going to talk briefly about the findings around the control environment. So that's page 69 of the agenda pack. And as Suresh already mentioned, we're in the process of testing the membership data that is submitted to the actuaries, and this is a work that we undertake every 3 years when the actuaries review the amount of contributions. And as part of the testing, we identified some of the documents, and I'm talking about primary evidence that support the key inputs into those reports. Some are missing, or there are a few minor differences between the supporting documents and the data. We're also working closely with management and trying to get supporting documentation to support some numbers for pensioners and dependents, and this is one of the key open items we're working through with management. The second, so we are recommending to revisit the controls around the maintenance of data that supports these reports as a result of our findings. And the second control recommendation is around the fair value hierarchy that was already mentioned. So next, I'm going to take you to Appendix E, which is page 79 of the agenda pack, and this lists the outstanding items. Some have already been progressed from the date that the report was prepared. So I'm only going to talk about the ones still outstanding. The annual report, as James mentioned, we're expecting to do the work in early November and have that ready by the time we sign off. And then ongoing concern, we're still finalizing the last pieces of consultation internally. So that's on our side. I already mentioned the triennial data testing and the standard management letter and subsequent events review, which will take place close to the sign-off date. And this sums up the points I wanted to emphasize.
So we're happy to take any questions, Chair.
Suresh, thank you. I'm just looking around. Do any members have any questions for EY on the audit? I'm not seeing any indications. I do have one, actually, Suresh, I would like to raise. Just in terms of the issues with the membership data, I'm a little concerned to hear that because, as you possibly know, there's quite a substantial project that has gone on in the last year to actually tidy up membership data, which I understand to be quite successful. So I'm interested to know if there are any particular characteristics. I think what I took from Larissa's comments was that on occasions EY were unable to trace certain items of data. So I would be interested to know if there were characteristics beyond that. And then I would also like to ask James whether the management team are in agreement with the control recommendations which are coming forward. So
yeah, okay. I'll ask Larissa in a second to come in maybe a bit of detail on any specific characteristics around what we identified. But I suppose to provide a bit of context, I audit 6 other pension funds, local government pension fund schemes, and we have had exactly the same issues at every pension fund that we are testing that membership data. Some far more significant in terms of data quality issues than we've identified in this pension fund. So I think it's a general. I wouldn't say it's an issue as such, but definitely generally we've identified that there are some deficiencies in the either quality of the data that's held or actually data itself that's been retained, that we haven't been able to then verify the information that we're testing. But Larissa, can you give any more detail on the characteristics relevant to the pension fund?
So mainly we find that older members might have some missing supporting documents, and some was due to data being stored in an old system and mention not being able to retrieve that data. And then in terms of testing amounts to supporting evidence, we're still working through that, so hopefully we can resolve that.
So if I can understand, it may be more about constraints in the ability to retrieve, as opposed to any overriding characteristic in the things that you're finding missing. Is that correct?
That's the impression we get, but I think it's also for management to comment.
Yes, I agree. James, can you perhaps add something here?
Yeah, going back, we transitioned from Capita into Surrey, and I guess there were some data gaps in the information that was transferred from Capita. And we are aware that generally across all pension funds there are data issues. I would like to point out actually that we've been running projects throughout the year to actually improve the data quality, and a bit later on in the agenda I can show you the actual improved data scores that we've got, which actually look quite impressive actually in terms of an improvement. However, there are still gaps, so it's an ongoing thing in terms of trying to improve data quality. We've got ongoing projects or ongoing projects with ITM, which have identified areas where we need to move, and again projects will be put in place to sort of rectify those issues raised by ITM. So it's an ongoing process in terms of data cleansing and sort of keeping all this information up to date. And some of it in terms of data retrieval is tricky. For example, EY have asked for copy payslips, but in general Surrey don't provide payslips. What they do is because they'll provide one payslip when there's a change in pay, but otherwise they don't provide copy payslips. So in that case, they're not sending out payslips. So there's nothing to actually print off the system, like, for example, we have at Hillingdon. So for the council, it's quite easy to go to the HR system and say, can I have a copy payslip, please? And they'll print one off. But Surrey don't hold that information. They don't actually they print out a physical payslip and put it in the post, but they don't hold anything on a soft copy in the system. So again, some of the information isn't actually available because of the way the system is set up. But in terms of data quality, it's an issue across the board, and we know that there's ongoing projects to keep on cleaning up. So we're working towards that as part of the whole Surrey administration and data cleansing and transition.
Thank you, James. That's very helpful. Okay. Any more questions for Tony?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Related to the data problems, presumably most of these are historic, and do they relate mainly to the scheduled and admitted bodies?
Can
So
someone help Tony with that one, please? It's a great question, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say to Larissa, are you able to identify anything between the two bodies?
I wonder if we've lost Larissa.
She's still there.
No, I'm just trying to understand exactly what you mean with the question.
If I may, Chair, I might chip in just for a second as they actually. So the in terms of the membership data for the valuation, and this is a kind of across the board across the LGPS, the data is pretty good for active members and for pensioner members. And for Hillingdon in particular, I echo the comments that have been made so far. The data compared to sort of 3-4 years ago is stellar at Hillingdon now. It really is good. There's been a huge level of work done. The place where the gap remains, and it's the same across the whole LGPS, it's really for deferred members who have left active status but are waiting to withdraw their pension. And a lot of it comes from the time gaps there. So someone might leave active service and then they might be waiting 20-30 years to withdraw their pension. And it's unfortunately with the resources constraints that all pension funds are under, the priority are paying the benefits out to the pensioners who are currently retired, and then obviously everything that's going on with active members where you're gathering contributions. So the thing that is left till the end is these deferred members, about whether they are due to get a refund with unprocessed leavers type thing, and that tends to be where the gaps are, and that's the bit that is just by definition the hardest to tie up. And I suspect that's where quite a few of the kind of queries come from, and I suspect that's what EY are seeing as well across the other funds. So from the kind of funding point of view, paying the pensions right, making sure everything's kind of running as a fund, it's kind of all pretty much as you'd expect and under control. There's just these kind of, and it's a small subset of members that are just quite tricky, and they're tricky at Hillingdon and they will be tricky across the board. So that would be, to answer the question there from Councillor Egginton, for scheduled bodies and admitted bodies, it'll be the same problem if they've got these members, essentially.
Thank you, Craig. Tony, does that give you what you need?
I think it does. It would be useful to know the proportion. I guess it sounds like it's a relatively small proportion and a reducing proportion, but I think it would be worthwhile knowing. And also that the effect, what percentage of the overall fund or liabilities are within this category of problems with data.
Well, can I suggest we ask officers to take that away and provide an answer to the...
I think it's something which won't be immediately available.
Not something which will be at anybody's fingertips, I'm sure. John, I think I saw you indicate.
Just wanted to ask the question, with deferred members, how frequently do we contact them to find out if they're alive or whatever? I mean, what is our procedure in terms of standards with contacted deferred members?
May I pass this over to Yvonne?
You're on.
Did you hear me?
Yvonne, you're on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
We can now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. In terms of deferred members, I think, like Craig has explained, the tendency is to look at the pensioners and the actives. But I think if we recall, there was recently quite a comprehensive address tracing exercise done on the deferred members, which was quite successful. And as James indicated, you know, those figures are now in, and it has shown great improvement, you know, in the quality of the information that we've got. Obviously, it's too late to have shown up in that as at the end of March, But beyond that, then it should show up. But yes, the deferred members, they are monitored, you know, missing bits of information. There are projects in place, like the recent one that has just been completed. And there are other projects to look at deferred member missing information also in the scheme. So they're not forgotten. There are programs going on. And I think because of other activities which will come up in part 2, you know, all the data is being looked at comprehensively.
Thank you, Yvonne. Does that give you what you need, John? Okay, and clearly we will get some more contextual information outside this meeting.
Yeah, I'm fine, Chair. I just...
Thank you, John. Okay, any other questions for Suresh and Larissa? I don't see anything. So, so thank you to EY for the work this year and the continuing efforts and the presentation. So the recommendation that the committee has to consider is whether it's happy to note the draft findings from EY on the audit for the period 2019-2020. Do I have a proposer for that, please? Tony, thank you. And the seconder? Not seeing anybody. Philip, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so that that concludes the session on audit.
Oh, Chairman, sorry, we just needed to take the vote on that one.
Sorry, I do beg your pardon. All in favour? Yes, everybody in favour? Yeah. So I think that's passed then, Liz.
Thank you.
My apologies. Okay, so if we can then move on to item 6, investment strategy and fund manager performance. James, can I turn this one over to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. Between March and June, the fund has increased by 80 million to 1.069 billion. Obviously, as we've seen, sort of the end of March was the height of the coronavirus, and markets have settled somewhat during that period, although they haven't done much since June. As of today, I had a look today, and the unaudited value of the fund is 1.075 billion. So it's up 6 million from the end of June. In terms of performance over the quarter, we've returned 8.04%, but unfortunately that's still behind the benchmark. And in terms of the 1-year figures, we're still trying to catch up, and we're 1.76 showing return, sorry, of 1.76%. In terms of the report, it shows, or it highlights, underperformance of M&G, LGT and Adam Street, but that's sort of slightly skewed. And that's a product of those funds actually winding down their holdings. So actually the values within those funds are actually quite minimal. The real impact on the performance has been the 2 active equity managers, UBS and Epoch. UBS are behind the benchmark 14% year to date and 1 year, and 2.9% for the quarter. Epoch, or LSIV Income Fund, Epoch, are behind the benchmark by 10% year to date, 1 year, and 6.17% for the quarter. Now, obviously, we've discussed quite a lot about UBS and Epoch, and I propose that we sort of discuss this further in part 2 of the agenda, if that's okay with you, Chair. With that said, I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, James. Does anybody have any questions for James, please? I'm not seeing anything. Obviously, we have the opportunity to move on to some of the decisions at hand in part 2 of the agenda relating to the investment portfolio. So can I suggest that we consider the recommendation that we note the fund performance update? Proposer for that, please? Tony, thank you. Second, John, thank you very much. All in favour? Yeah, I think so. That is carried, Liz. Thank you. So we now then move to item 7, which is the Stewardship Code 2020, and report on that. So James, again, if I can pass this across to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of taking a step back, the aim of the Stewardship Code is to set out principles for asset owners and managers to set high stewardship standards in order they can create long-term value leading to sustainable benefits for the economy, environment and society. Currently, the fund is signed up to the 2012 code. However, compared to the 2020 code, that was quite an easy task to do, and the 2020 code is much more onerous in terms of the reporting and all the tasks you need to undertake. There are 12 principles which need to be applied and explained, and the required to the required standard. And to remain a signatory of the code, the pension fund will be required to submit an annual stewardship report demonstrating how the 12 principles have been met over the previous 12 months. The date for submission for the final report has been extended due to COVID to the 30th of April 2021. The report is then evaluated once submitted, and if it meets the criteria, Hillingdon Pension Fund will then be included in the list of signatories in the code. As I've mentioned, the new code requirements are extremely onerous, and if the recommendation is approved to sign up to the 2020 code, we intend to work with ISIO in preparing the annual stewardship report. However, I should also just sort of point out and caveat, if we start now, we'll only have sort of 5 months to implement any shortfalls that we're not doing. So it may be necessary to submit after the April deadline, meaning there could be a gap in sort of being a signatory. With that in mind, if I could pass back to you, Chair, for any comments.
Thank you, James. Philip, you're indicating, please.
I did. Firstly, to make the observation that this will link to the Part 2 report on the ESN anyway, but there's really a question. It touched on what James said. I mean, I just wonder how onerous this will be and what kind of impact it will have from a resource perspective. How big a journey have we got to make? I can see the assessment document at the back. I wonder if David is able to offer any comment at this stage, or do we simply not know? Can you give us a sense of that, please?
Sorry, I struggled to hear you, Councillor Cawthorne.
I think the question was, James, the likely impact in terms of resources and the achievability. Am I correct, Philip? Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Well, in terms of resources, this is why I'm suggesting that we work with ISIO and sort of team up with ISIO in terms of having an extra resource so we can achieve this. So we're hoping that obviously we will work towards the April deadline with ISIO, and of course we will aim to put everything in place for April. But yes, there are resource issues, hence why we're going to sort of help or ask for ISIO's help in achieving this.
Chair, if I could come in on that, I think the first step that we agreed with the officers is just to outline what will be required to comply, and then to compare current state to what complying with the code would look like in order to identify the gaps. So we propose to do that as an initial step, and from there work with the officers to determine what resources required effectively to move from current state to meeting the requirements.
Thank you, David. That's helpful. And anybody else want to raise any questions on this? Perhaps if I might comment, I mean, having looked at the 2020 code, I mean, there is absolutely no doubt that this is the reporting required under this code is onerous in the extreme. I would say it's I mean, it's not simply a matter of crunching numbers. You know, there actually are some pretty subjective judgments that you have to give in order to support the investment strategy and so forth. And so I think it is challenging. I think it's not only a potentially a drain on resources, but it's also, I would say, challenging in the context that we do have 3 fund managers who are not signed up to the code themselves. And I think this is something that we must come back to, perhaps in the part 2 segment of the meeting, to talk about just how we deal with this. But having made those comments, I mean, my feeling is that this really does represent best practice, and it's something that we, no matter how demanding it is, it's something that we must do. So if there are no other questions or comments from members, the recommendation is that we agree to sign up to the 2020 code, even though that may be, may mean that we don't make it into the first wave. I think, James, if I understand you correctly. So can we have a proposer for that a step, please? John, thank you. And a seconder, Philip, thank you very much. All in favour of that? Yeah, so I think that is carried. Thank you. So if we can then move to the governance policy update, please. And Yvonne, I think you're going to speak to us about that one.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Hillingdon Council, as the administering authority of the LGPS, is required by regulation to publish a governance policy setting out how the functions to administer the scheme are delegated. These functions have been set out in the governance policy, which is renewed every 3 years. This has now come up for renewal. Officers have done a first review in consultation with the governance advisor, and it has also been seen by the pension board, whom have all made recommendations for change. I think the key modification is that of the London Civ governance, because they had a review of their governance structure, and they are the investment vehicle for pooling, which forms part of the governance structure, not directly under the council, but they are a major part of the governance structure in terms of investment. All the other changes are minor, which are set out in the report, and the committee is being asked to approve the draft review for publication.
Thank you, Yvonne. Does that conclude your comments? Or did you have more to say?
I think that's it. The key changes are set out on page 1 of the report, but the major one is the change in the structure of the CIV.
Yes, thank you.
The others are minor, just updating names and organizations.
Thank you, Yvonne. Philip, I think you would like to raise a point on this or make an observation.
A couple of things. Can I ask if you can hear me first of all? It was said last time I couldn't. Good.
We can sort of.
I'll persevere. A couple of observations, really. I think in the context of the later discussion around the CIV, I think this is a very important document, really, to because it sets out our framework in terms of how we will hold them to account. So it's important we can use it for that purpose. I'm conscious there's a bit of a difference between what this says and the reality on the ground with the CIV, but I think it's important we have this as a starting point, so that's good. Second point I make, just looking at the compliance statement in Appendix A, the section that covers training, it talks about us not having a annual training plan. I would just make a plea that we don't start from the beginning there, because we have all completed training assessments in the last year or so. I think that's a good starting point for us. So I'll just make that point for now. Otherwise, happy with it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Philip. I am aware that the board has spent quite a bit of time looking at this policy, and I know it's been through an approval process. Roger or any other members of the board, do you want to add any comments to what has been said? Roger.
Just to say, yes, it's been through the pensions board, and the only thing that I think Yvonne hasn't mentioned so far is there are a couple of areas in the compliance statement, Appendix A, where the authority is shown as being non-compliant or partially compliant, and we've been through those with Yvonne and satisfied ourselves that we understand why that is the case, but and that despite that, that it's still fine for this to go forward for approval.
Thank you, Roger. That's great. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? I'm not seeing anything. I think I mean I would just amplify the point that Philip made. I think it's interesting that we are seeing a number of emerging new governance policies coming from the London Civ, and I'm sure that we'll get on to this in the part 2 section on civ governance that Claire is going to help us with. But absolutely, I think it is a question of ensuring that actions do comply with policies, and that I think remains to be established. So the recommendation before us, please, is to approve the draft policy and compliance statement for publication. Can I have a proposer for that, please? Philip, thank you. And seconder Tony, you're good with that? All in favour? Yeah, so I think we're all good with that. Thank you very much. So the next item, I think once again, Yvonne, falls to you. It's the administration report, please.
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Chair. For this report, I'll start with the self-service administration numbers, which continue to be on the up. I think over this quarter, there has been a significant increase, and I assume that is down to people not being able to get as much access through the help desk. See, more people have signed on, especially in the active area. They are up to 42% of members being signed up. From there, I will move on. I'll come back to the KPIs, but another few areas to highlight in the administration is that the annual benefit statements, they were all issued to the statutory deadline of the 31st of August, and also the annual allowance letters that were meant to go out for the 6th of October, those were issued as well. And an update since this report is that we have since had the data score report. We have since had the data score report, and the data score report shows that the data quality, which was alluded to by James, the data specific to the scheme, which would be like, joining times, leaving times, scheme specific data, that was up from 86% the previous year to 94.7% for 2020. So that's an improvement. And then the common data score, which are things that can be found elsewhere, like names, addresses, NI numbers, those have also shown an improvement up from 80% the previous year to 88% this year. So that shows that, there, from the testing that has been done, that the data quality has improved somewhat over that period. Sorry, shall I continue, Councillor?
Yes, Yvonne, if you continue. I've just noted that we have a member wishing to raise a question, but we will pick that up when you've concluded your comments. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So that leads on to the KPIs. Now, the KPIs, they continue to be on the decline. I think what makes it even difficult to understand, a corrective approach is that there isn't sort of a consistent pattern. It's like 1 month, one bit is up, the other bit is down. we have raised this with Surrey, that, you know, we would like a specific meeting to discuss the quality of the KPIs, how those targets are, you know, they're not being met. And I think the worrying thing is that it's on the key items that the TPR has asked, those that directly affect member benefits, that they have asked to be focused on, that, you know, those are still on the decline. We have since had the September report, the report extending to September since this report, and the figures they're even worse. In fact, we have sent that figure back to a senior person at Surrey to ask for an explanation and a meeting. So this area, it continues to decline. I think, yeah, that's the main points for this area.
Thank you, Yvonne. I must mention to members that clearly there will be an opportunity in the part 2 segment of the agenda to talk about some of the remedies that are open to us as far as this trend is concerned. But at this stage, Philip, you indicated, can I pass it across to you?
Yeah, I will ask about this now, since it's a comment that's been made in a part 1 report, and that's the comment at the top of page 171 about the reduced set of hours and resources. Have I read that correctly in terms of reduced resource going in from Surrey, and is that what we expected given the discussions we've had? Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I didn't quite hear the question. Can you please repeat?
It's not my evening, is it? I'll try again. The comments at the top of page 173 about reduced resources and hours, is that in line with our expectation, given the discussions we've had, we've reported back before?
So I'm not seeing where you are. Is this something?
Yvonne, I think it's the paragraph that's entitled Staffing and Resources.
Staffing and Resources.
Says that staff at Surrey work remotely with reduced and set hours, and then contrast it to the situation at Hillingdon.
That's correct. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, the reduced service desk hours is still going on. I think if you go on to, when you go onto the website, you can see the set hours for this service desk. So yes, it's still reduced.
I'm sorry, that wasn't my question. I can see it's reduced. My question was, is that what we're expecting given what the discussion we've had? Does that make, sorry if that's not clear.
No, it's fine. That's clear, Councillor.
Thank you.
This was as a result of the COVID-19 and the remote working. There were some issues with them getting out, like the telephony equipment out into the various locations where the staff were working from home. So they are still not back in their office as yet. And from discussions with them, the understanding is that they're actually moving offices. So there doesn't seem to be like an intention to come back into that main office where they were, but to be moved elsewhere. And whilst that is in train, they are still working from home. So the sort of the telephony is reduced. So it is ongoing.
I'll do it there. Thank you for that answer. Anyway. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, Philip, I think the thing we've got to recognise here with the trend in these KPIs and where we are is that, we have to have continued working arrangements with Surrey for at least another year. And I know, therefore, that officers have already embarked on a series of meetings with Surrey in order to work out a regime that sees a turnaround in these KPIs. I think, James, there'll be an opportunity for us to discuss this in greater detail in the part 2 segment of the agenda. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the update on the meetings with Surrey in part 2, and we can expand on this. Yep.
But suffice to say, at this stage, it continues to be a concern. Roger.
Yes, Chairman. In preparation for the part 2 part of this item, I went onto the website of I think it's East Sussex County Council, James, Surrey's major partner.
Yes, that's the Orbis partner, East Sussex. Yep.
Yeah. So on that website are, in the open part of the agenda, because I couldn't see the other part, there are some quite worrying and very explicit comments about the staffing problems there, which I would support Councillor Cawthorne's concern. Some of the things that are reported there, like allowing members of staff who are critical to all go off on leave at the same time, those are particularly concerning. And I'm not quite sure what we're going to do about that when we get to part 2, when we start going into more detail about the administration side of things. But it doesn't sound as if things are going very well at Surrey.
No. Well, Roger, I suggest that we do pick this up in the part 2 segment, because I know that the officer team here at Hillingdon have recognised this and are debating the issue with Surrey in some detail. Yeah. Okay. Do we have any more questions or comments for Yvonne on this item? I'm not seeing anything. So the recommendation is that the committee note this report. Proposer and a seconder, please. Proposer Philip, seconded by, well, I can either take John or Tony. I'll go with John on this occasion. All those in favour? Yeah. So we're good with that. So okay. So let us now then move on to item 10 on the agenda, which is an update on regulatory matters. Now, can I just say that it would be very easy to spend, I would suggest, probably an hour and a half on this subject, but we don't have the luxury of that. So Craig is going to give us a helpful update in terms of an outline, but I am going to suggest to members that these regulatory changes are of such significance that we probably should be looking to convene a training session on this subject. I think it is pretty difficult for Craig to do it justice in the 10 minutes or so I think he's been told that he's got. So with no more prevarication, Craig, can I turn it over to you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to try and share my screen to try and share slides. So hopefully this works. Open. Here we go. Can everyone see a set of slides? Perfect. Okay, yeah, so there's been an unbelievable amount going on in the world, as we're all aware, and a staggering amount of it seems to be impacting pensions and LGPS pensions. And so we pulled together a fairly detailed paper, which is obviously in the committee packs, just giving a kind of high-level summary on a few kind of hot topics that are going on in the world. I'm going to focus on 2 of these just very quickly in the 10 minutes allocated, and that's the Mcleod case and the exit payment regulations, the 95k cap, as it's called. That's the 2 I'm going to focus on, and then hopefully we'll do some sort of detailed training session afterwards. So without further ado, the Mcleod case it was a court case brought in the judges scheme. by a judge against the government, and it was brought in a discriminatory case in relation to age. And it was to do with when all the public service schemes changed from a final salary scheme to a career average revalued earnings scheme. And that was around back in kind of 2014 for most schemes. The decisions were in kind of 2011, 2012. And basically what that, the new scheme came in, and what they said was, if you're within 10 years of retirement at 2012, you'll get a certain benefit. And if you're not within 10 years of retirement at that point in 2012, you'll get a different benefit. So straight away there, there's a clear discriminatory action between whether you are a certain age or aren't a certain age. It was warned against. The government were warned not to do this at the time, but they went ahead and did it. And eventually it's gone through all the courts now, and it's been Judge's scheme and Fire scheme both had separate court cases, and the government lost both ones. It was proved beyond any benefit of a doubt that you were discriminating against people because of a certain age. And the remedy to do that is that obviously everyone needs to get the better benefit. So if the government set out, if the rules were favouring one section of members over another, the only solution is to level everyone up to get the same benefit, which seems quite sensible. And that's what happened when the remedy came out. So in pictorial form, you've got a case of going forward for like a sort of a 10-year spell between essentially 2012 and 2022. You've got a bunch of members who are getting a kind of best of both worlds. So essentially they are getting a best of two benefits. So from an administration point of view, they have to calculate two separate levels of benefits, and whatever one's better, that's what the member gets. Said like that seems quite simple and fine. The problem is that certain data hasn't been gathered for these members, because obviously back in 2014, certain members moved over straight away into a new scheme, and we're now in 2020. So we're a long way on. And as we mentioned earlier, obviously, when you go back historically for data, the further you go back, the harder things get. There's a bit of a quirk here as well, in that although members are going to have the best of both worlds for this set period, a member could still be waiting to retire for, say, another 20, 30 years after that 2022 date. So this data is actually going to have to be held for a long, long time into the future. In the report we set out, I think typically for a typical fund, it's about 20 or 25% potentially of members that are maybe captured by this. So that's how many people could potentially fall into scope, and we'd have to do these extra calculations for. So obviously that's going to be a large administration burden on itself. The actual impact from a funding point of view is probably actually going to be relatively small, but you have to do the calculation for all these members. And the critical piece here is that this only kicks in, so the best of both, as in effectively someone getting a final salary scheme, this only really kicks in if someone has had salary increases significantly above inflation. And as we're all kind of fully aware, over the last few years, and certainly since 2014, public service workers have not typically experienced large salary increases. So if we were looking at it kind of on today's basis, this wouldn't actually kick in for that many members. But because this has been projected into the future, we don't know what's going to happen to public sector pay, and also we don't know what's going to happen to an individual's pay, because it's completely dependent on an individual's pay when they come to retire. That's when these calculations are actually done. So the next slide here, it's showing the kind of the high level impact. So really, from, if I've got my actuary hat on, from a funding perspective, making sure the right amount of money is in the scheme, this is a very, very small impact. If we're being honest about it, very, very small. Slight increase in benefits, but more than manageable around when we did the valuation. The real challenge here is from an administration point of view, and obviously we've talked about administration quite a lot already today. But one of the things that needs to be put in place is there needs to be a key kind of project plan put in place for this. This is one of the biggest things that's happened to the LGPS. I've mentioned how many members it potentially impacts, and data is going to have to be gathered from employers and data is going to have to be gathered, historic data as well. So that's a significant undertaking. The government are probably going to allow this. It's going to take months to do this, but the government's probably going to allow about 2 years, give or take, to get this sorted. But they want people starting to plan for it now, because this is a really large undertaking. So the thing I'd say to the committee, obviously with overall responsibility for running this pension fund, is that you need to make sure there is resource and expertise available and support the officers in order for this project to get off the ground, given everything else that's currently going on, to make sure that ultimately members' benefits aren't affected by this. Because ultimately, when someone comes to retire, they have to be paid the right benefit. I mean, that's the fundamental point in the scheme. And there's going to have to be a large sort of communication exercise here, because if the LGPS wasn't confusing enough, this is going to add to it. And that's a communication to the employers and also obviously out to the members. So that was my high level summary of Mcleod.
Craig, before you go on, can I just ask one question, please?
Yeah.
Do we think the music has stopped on this? I mean, is the government prepared to just abide by the appeal decisions here, or is there the possibility that we might see legislation, given that the government has got plenty of other things on its hands at the moment?
No, so this one's all kind of signed, sealed, and delivered pretty much. The reason this has been going on for 3 or 4 years, and it's been kicking through various stages. This has now been definitively ruled against the government, and they actually took it to either the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals. I can't remember which one, and they threw it out and just said, you've not got a leg to stand on. This is definitely discriminatory, and it's all public service schemes. So it's fire, NHS, police, civil service. It's everyone, and it needs to be remedied. And I think actually the fire scheme has to be done like immediately, because they've got for the fire and the police, it's a much bigger impact on members' benefits. But obviously for the LGPS, given the size of it, there's a lot of members that potentially could be impacted, even though it's maybe relatively small. So what happened was the remedy came out, I think the consultation came out in July, the proposed remedy, but our understanding is that is essentially the final ruling, and we don't expect there to be any changes to that.
Thank you.
No problem. Just when I'm on discriminatory rulings for 30 seconds, there's another ruling called the Goodwin Impact, which obviously was mentioned in the document we provided. Just on a very high level, it affects far fewer members, but it's another discriminatory case where the government have lost again, and there will be benefits improvements, but it'll be a far less members than Mcleod, so again a far less impact, but it will just need a little bit of administration. So for the members that it does impact, there's going to have to be a little bit of tracing being done, because this is potentially for quite old members who are either getting paid too little a pension or are not getting paid a pension they should have been due since 1988, potentially. So very small impact, but just to mention it there when I'm talking about age discrimination. And I know there seems to be so many of these cases going on, but as far as we can tell, that's everything now being ruled on that could possibly be discriminated against. I don't think there's anything left that the government could have got wrong. Now, please don't hold me to that, but from doing some analysis, I don't think there's anything left for members to challenge on. It seems like everything's now done. Fingers crossed. Okay, the second one is the exit payment cap regulation, or the 95k cap, as it's called. Now, this one is a really, really difficult one to explain, and this can really impact all members of the scheme, and it's so it can get a bit it could get a bit political. It could grow arms and legs really, but as it stands, and at the very end of this I'll say one more point on it, but as it stands, the government said all public service workers should have a sort of cap to what their benefits are when you come to retire, and they realised that if you're paying out more than £100,000 when someone comes to retire, like essentially extra money, that does not look good to anyone. So they tried to limit it to £95,000. This was first introduced or floated, I think it was back in 2015, and it was to try and keep it to 95,000. And initially we thought pensions wasn't going to be involved in that calculation. So you'll see my slide here. Initially it was going to be redundancy payments and severance payment, which is the other settlements piece, and pension strain was not going to be included. When the rules actually came out, once everything was kind of unpaused because of Brexit and everything else, pension strain is included for the LGPS. And that fundamentally changes this. It changes it a real lot. And what that means actually is it doesn't capture the traditional sort of fat cats, for example, that this was potentially targeting to stop large payments on redundancy. What it potentially captures from here when you see the examples is it actually maybe captures someone that's on a relatively modest salary with a long level of service. And that was never the intentions before, but nevertheless, that is what's come through from the government. So this is a real potential change. And what has to happen there is the benefits have to reduce, because if you physically can't pay out more than 95,000 as a council versus, so the council say paying out their redundancy part with also the pension strain, if it can't be more than 95 in total, something's got to give. What got introduced at the same time as this, which was again unexpected, when the consultation came out, they actually said that if you take your pension early in the LGPS, unreduced, you're no longer going to get your statutory redundancy payment, which no one was expecting. Or if you want to take your pension early, you'll have to reduce it in order to take your full statutory redundancy payment. Or you could take your full statutory redundancy payment and not take your pension early and wait till you normally retire. So there's a lot of choices that are now going to have to be given to members on this, and it's very, very confusing. And the consultation is due to finish on the 4th of November. So this is essentially in play almost right now. And just this morning, just to throw a complete spanner into the works, there was a legal challenge launched this morning against this whole exit payment thing. And I think it was the LLG that launched the challenge, and they're going to take this as high as they can take it because they think this is fundamentally flawed. They don't think this is right at all. So this is a real watch this space. In terms of the current impact on the fund will have to process redundancies and will have to process retirements. Things can't stop because of this, as far as I'm aware. So there is guidance out there that I think says you have to follow the current regulations as they are in play. But someone might know more than me there. And this is moving on an almost daily basis. So if members are contacting the fund to retire, it's absolutely critical that the fund follows the latest guidance and follows everything to the T, because there's a huge potential here for challenges in the future if that is not what's happened. And the headline really here is that if someone had retired, say, a month ago, they're potentially going to get a much better benefit than someone retiring next year. And that will be, unfortunately, because of this, what the government are introducing there. So sorry, that was very much a whirlwind in the short time. So hopefully that was okay.
Thank you very much, Craig. I'm not seeing the entire screen due to your slides, so can I ask? Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Craig, please? I'm not seeing anything. Oh, Roger.
Craig, could you just confirm that did you say a legal challenge has been started this morning?
Yes. If you just give me 2 seconds, I will see. I don't know if it was I don't know if it was a pre-legal challenge, or let me just see. Lawyers in local government issued they requested a judicial review of the legislation that fed into that. So that was just released this morning from the lawyers in local government.
Okay, well, today we received from the LGA more information about these issues, and that takes it on as well, because there's the LGA's draft response to the consultation, which is basically saying they think that this this situation is deeply flawed with regard to the lower paid workers.
That's right.
And that they are raising that very strongly. The Scheme Advisory Board have taken Council's opinion, sent it back because they had further queries, and they are going to be sending out that Council's opinion to local authorities once they've got it. The position that some local authorities are going to be in, or employers are going to be in, where they have made commitments and been caught out by this deadline happening much earlier, is also something that SAB is quite concerned about. I was quite concerned about it, so I rang Hayley, one of the other board members who is in HR administration, and was very pleased to hear that for Hillingdon, very sound action had been taken to reduce the exposure as much as we possibly can. But there's some major uncertainties and major challenges and conflicts between what's in the regulations and what's it between the regulations. So as you say, watch this space. This is going to be very troublesome.
Yeah, the main problem across all this is that this is public sector wide, and that's where the real issue is. So the LGPS has a specific problem because it's a funded pension scheme, and it has the pension strains on top of that. So it's kind of caught in the crosshairs even more than everyone else. But because it's a government wide thing and a public sector wide thing, it really makes it really difficult when there's conflicting regulations. And to be honest, it's a complete mess. It's probably the best way to finish off, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree entirely with that. It's a complete mess. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Craig? I'm not seeing anything. Well, Craig, thank you for dealing with two complex subjects so clearly in such a short space of time. As I say, I think the committee need to come back to this and try and organise a somewhat fuller session on these regulatory changes. But please, I think the recommendation is that we note the report that you've provided. So please, if we could have a proposer. Thank you, Tony, and a seconder, please. Thank you, Philip. All those in favour? Thank you very much. So with that, we now move on to voluntary scheme pays policy. Yvonne, this is over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. This policy arises from an HMRC regulation, which states that a member's pension benefit is allowed to grow by, the current figure is by £40,000 without attracting a tax charge. This amount can vary. It can be less depending on the earnings of the member. Once the pension benefit for a year exceeds 40,000, then a tax charge may be relevant to be paid to the HMRC. Now, if this tax charge is £2,000 or more, that's the current figure, then the member has the right, once they meet the conditions, they have the right to ask the scheme to pay that tax charge over to the HMRC on their behalf in return for a reduced benefit. So that's for those where the tax charge is over 2,000, and that is called the mandatory scheme pays. Now, there are some members where they may incur a tax charge, but it's less than the 2,000. Now, the regulations does not require, it does not oblige the scheme to pay in that instance. But a lot of authorities, because the regulation is silent on it, they have used their discretion and to set out the conditions under which members that fall below that £2,000 tax charge can ask the scheme to pay that money on their behalf for a similar reduction in their benefit. So this policy is setting out the conditions under which those that do not meet this criteria may ask for the council to use its discretion to pay that over. And the committee is being asked to approve the voluntary schemes pay policy for implementation. There is a schedule attached at the back which gives a bit more detail on the various sliding scales and the amounts that might be due. And the amounts that might be due. But the committee is being asked to approve the policy for the authority to use its discretion.
Thank you, Yvonne. Philip, you have a question, I think.
Just a quick one, yes. The legislation's been around since 2004.
Yes.
The reference to a previous policy, was there one, or is this a new entirely new policy that's coming in? Thank you.
Okay, it is not an entirely new policy in terms of the mandatory side of it. I think part of what this policy is also to do is to make it more transparent, because the authority has been operating this policy as, I mean, it doesn't, for the mandatory side, it doesn't have a choice. But more and more often, what we have found is that other members that do not meet the criteria have been requesting this, and it has been looked at on a case-by-case basis and a decision made on that basis. So the officers feel that making a policy that is transparent, that clearly sets it out so that it is available for all that meet the criteria to be able to apply, that it is more transparent. So yes, it's been in place. The mandatory part has been going on, but there have also been a few cases where discretions have been used.
Thank you, that's fine.
Thank you, Philip. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if there's a mistake in your report, Yvonne. At the bottom of page 195, you talk about the tax charge, the payment or notification has to be given by 31st of July 2022, but I think it should be 2021 because that's in the year after the year of the tax charge. And the same applies to the top of page 199, which is part of the proposed scheme. There again, in the third bullet point down, the final line, I think that should be 31st July 2020, because that is in the year after the year in which the tax charge has arisen.
I will double check that, but I believe it's correct. The year it is referring to is the fiscal year.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the fiscal year.
But the fiscal year after the year 2019-20 is going to be the year 2020-21, and the 31st July in that year is in 2020, not 2021, which is the following year.
Yeah, I can double check that for you.
I think so.
Yeah, I can double check that for you.
Thank you. I've just been dealing with a case not to do with the pension, local government pension scheme, but another tax case. So.
Okay.
I will double check that. I can double check.
Can I suggest that Yvonne, you take that away and we just get a confirmation one way or the other to the committee on that one?
Yes, Councillor Goddard.
And but I don't think, Tony, that goes to the heart of the principle behind this, does it? It's to
correct a mistake.
It's important detail. Yeah, that's important detail. Okay, any other questions, please, on this subject? I'm not seeing anything, so The recommendation is that we approve the policy for implementation, subject obviously to the checking of the point that Councillor Edgington has raised. Proposer for that, please. Tony, thank you. Seconder, Philip, thank you very much. All those in favour? Yeah, so that's passed. Thank you very much. So if we then move to a segment which has occupied a substantial part of our papers, the Pension Fund Annual Report, which, correct me if I'm wrong, James, but I think it runs to in excess of 200 pages.
Yeah.
James.
Yes, it does indeed run to 200 pages, and I think I've tried to sort of chop down the version to make it slightly shorter as well, by excluding all the policies that are sort of published. So just sort of taking a step back, the pension fund is required to produce an annual report and publish it by the 1st of December each year. It's prepared based on 2019 SIPFA guidance, which requires specific disclosures and contains information on the fund's activities through the year. So it's quite prescribed on how we need to prepare the annual report. EY will commence their audit of that report on the 5th of November, as we've previously discussed, to ensure its compliance against the guidance and consistency with the annual audited accounts, because the accounts are also in there. So we just need to make sure we've got it matches exactly to the statement of accounts. And the final audit consistency statement will be brought to audit committee on the 24th of November for approval. At this stage, committee are asked to approve the draft, but as I mentioned, it is a draft. It still needs to sort of go through the officers' due diligence and audits as well. So as it's in its current state, committee are asked to approve the draft. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any questions or comments on the draft as it stands, please? No, I'm not seeing anything. Fine. So we're asked to approve the draft report, subject to external sign-off on consistency. Proposer for that, please. Philip, thank you. Second, Tony, thank you very much. All those in favour? Thank you. So that is passed. Thank you very much. The next subject is the risk register. James, I think this is again over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. The risk register has been updated in consultation with Councillor Goddard, and 2 amendments have been made from the previous quarter. A new risk has been added, Pen 8, and that in regards to the transition from Surrey to the new administrator. It's been given a rating of E1, which reflects the likelihood of risk of failure being low, due to the sort of the big project management team behind it to make sure it happens. But however, should it go wrong, the impact is very large. So that's how the risk has been judged as E1 in regards to the administration transition. Also, we've updated Pen 14, which covers the change of ownership between KPMG and ISIO. It's been lowered to the lowest rating as the only thing that's really outstanding now in terms of the transition is the fact that KPMG are holding on to some historical data for ISIO. But ISIO are now completely self-sufficient. They're operating under their own cover. They've got their own FCA registrations and their own systems in place. So with that in mind, we felt that it was fair to reduce it to the lowest rating, because there isn't any risk at all now, really. Well, only a minimal risk due to the historic data being held at KPMG, but otherwise we felt the risk should be reduced to the lowest level. So those are the 2 changes to the risk register. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any points anybody would like to raise on the amended risk register as it stands? I'm not seeing anything, so thank you. So recommendation is that we note the update to the risk register, the specific risks identified, the measures being taken to mitigate those current risks. Proposer for that, please. Philip, thank you. Second, Councillor Graham, thank you. All those in favour? Yeah, very good, thank you. So we then come to James, the draft work programme, please.
Thank you, Chair. This will be quite brief. As normal, we've just set out a work plan for the upcoming meetings, but as you will know, this sort of starts out quite brief, and then as the quarter goes on, the agenda increases and increases. However, I would ask if any of the members do have any suggestions for upcoming meetings, just to let us know. I've already penciled in, we need to have a regulatory update on training, so we'll arrange that with members and obviously Hymans Robertson, and put a date in the diary for the training in that respect. And going forward, I need to liaise with Democratic Services to add additional committee dates for next year. So we will, so by the next quarter, we will have those dates and we can start increasing the work plan to increase more meetings. But basically that's it at the moment. So just pass back for approval.
Thank you. Any comments anybody would like to make, or suggestions for items to include in the work program going forward? I'm not seeing anything at this stage. So yeah, if we can just note the dates, please, and make I don't think we have any suggestions for future agenda items beyond that. So if we just note those dates and a proposer and a second for that, please. Tony, thank you, and Councillor Graham, thank you very much. All those in favour? Thank you very much. So that now concludes part one of our meeting. So we will now move to part two of the meeting, and the live stream to YouTube will be cut. So thank you to those for watching.
Okay, thank you. If you could all just remain on mute just for a moment while I cut the YouTube stream. Thank you.